Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays White Plume Mountain Notes series as I give my thoughts and advice and just general RPG and D&D rules, thoughts, and stuff like that as I run my party, my friendly local game store through White Plume Mountain, updated to 5th edition, and Tales from the Yawning Portal, which updates 7 classic adventures to 5th edition. This is actually the final video. It is concluded. So after this video, we will be returning to Out of the Abyss, and we'll do part 2 of Out of the Abyss. I know a lot of people have been wondering when that's going to happen, and the next video in this notes series should be Out of the Abyss. I also want to point out that basically the adventure's done. Last session basically finished off the dungeon. Uh, and everything in this video, there's a few notes about how I'm, running and interacting with the party and that sort of thing. But it's basically there's nothing new on White Plume Mountain. It's the official adventure. I'm homebrewing a conclusion, and I'm going to give my notes on that. But I just want to let people know right off the front that if you want more official White Plume Mountain stuff, it's pretty much already done. If you've watched all the other videos, you've got the whole adventure. Um, there's really nothing else. So I just want to make sure people know. I don't want people to watch this video and be like, there wasn't anything else about White Plume Mountain. So I mean, I hope you still stick along for the ride. But I just did want to make that clarification. So and I did have fun with homebrewing the end of it. And I still think there's some interesting stuff in here. So anyway, on we go. We'll go ahead and get straight to viewer feedback. And I will pull out my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback. And let's see what feedback there is to see. The first feedback here is from Wes Taylor, even though the account says Leah Williams. Wes is using his girlfriend's account, which he clarifies in the comments. But we were talking about running larger parties, and he said that here's some of the tips that Wes has when he runs larger parties. So when you call out a player for their turn, go ahead and give the next person a heads up. For example, Bob, and he used different, whatever he said, Batman and Jingle Hoop or Gingle Hoop, but say, hey Bob, it's your turn now, and Sarah, you're coming next. Kind of prep people that they're going to be coming up next. And then Wes has started asking players to supply him with a few initiative rolls at the beginning of a session, and you can get those rolls as players show up. Like waiting for the game to start instead of saying, okay, everybody give me the rolls. Get them as they get there to save time. I encourage players to go ahead and roll while they wait. Just keep the roll. If I feel the players are fudging these rolls, and make them wait their turn. Things he does that slow a fight down. He gives a D20 to the most valuable role player, and I've actually experienced that where at the end of the game he's like, okay, everybody vote who was the best role player, and people vote, and then he gives them a D20. He says it slows the fights down because players start narrating their attacks more, but that's a good thing. And he does buff or add creatures to each fight, or just send in reinforcements. So that's kind of some of the things he does for larger parties. And, if you're new to this series, I tend to run with a larger party. Now, right now, we are at 7, I think, maybe 8, which some people would consider a large party. This is kind of my standard party size. In fact, it's smaller than it's been at times. If you're not familiar, I run on behalf of a store. So do things a little bit different, a little bit more accommodating at the store than I may be in a personal campaign at my house or something like that. So there was also some discussion of homebrew versus official campaigns and official adventures and that sort of thing. And some of Wes's notes were, he said 5th edition pre-made adventures are lacking in footnotes. Old modules would read like this: an orc, and in parentheses, monster manual page, whatever, is watching the door and will cast fireball. and then it gives the player's handbook reference, page reference. And Wes said it helps him because he's dyslexic, finds his source material quickly. And then he says, and I agree with this, the weapons in the story are in a, like Whelm, are in a strange place in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I agree. They're so central to the adventure. I really feel like they should have reprinted the lore and all of that and stats and everything in the adventure. Maybe they're trying to save space because there's 7 adventures in the book. I don't know. But that seems weird to me. They're so central, but you have to go off to the Dungeon Master's Guide. That, good points. I do think that D&D 5th edition does seem to be making a habit of, if it's printed anywhere in the 3 core rule books, Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, they will not reprint it somewhere else, even if it's very central to an adventure or source book or whatever. They'll just say, go see the Monster Manual or whatever. They will not reprint it. That's basically what I've seen from 5th edition. Now, I've heard, I don't have direct experience of this because I've never played 4th edition, but I've heard that 4th edition was really good, like in adventures or whatever, they would reprint monster stat blocks and stuff right there. Like, this is the monster you need, and here's all the blocks, stats and stuff, even if that was already in the monster manual. I've heard that. I can't confirm that from firsthand knowledge, but that's handy if they do that. I really think you should be able to play D&D with just the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. Really, in some cases, just the Player's Handbook. The Monster Manual is interesting and cool, but I don't think that it should be a core book. To the point where if you buy a module or an adventure and it says you're going to fight, a Grick, and it says, refer to the Monster Manual for the Grick. I don't think that's cool. I mean, you bought the adventure and everything should be in that adventure. That's just my personal take on it. So anyway, okay. So Gerald Cruz, who's actually one of my previous players that had to move unexpectedly, so I'm really bummed about that. But he said, hey Shane, I was talking to my cousin who also plays D&D, and he said that whenever he DMs with a bigger than average party, he increases monster hit points by half for each player over the regular size. Just a thought. So there's a pattern. You just cut and dry. My set group size is, and I'm just throwing numbers out, 6. And for every player over that, I increase monster hit points by half. And, again and again, just make them tougher and tougher and tougher. There you go. It's just an easy way. Let's just do it really quick. Nothing wrong with that. Thanks, Gerald, for the comment there. Rob Plummer said, hey, Shane, love the videos. And you have some great ideas that I definitely have been using in my sessions. We will be doing White Plume Mountain as a side quest between the 2 parts of Out of the Abyss. These guys are all old school gamers, and I believe we are looking forward to the nostalgia of going through it again. I mean, we had fun with it. And a couple of my players had been through it, but it had been so long that they actually didn't remember. They kind of vaguely remembered some stuff, but it wasn't enough to allow, to run it for them or the other players. But yeah, it does feel a little old school, especially like there's some things that just like, that's just it, deal with it. That's just it. And it's a dungeon crawl, and it can kill you. So I think we can knock it out pretty quick as we play 3.5 hours weekly. So that was kind of a discussion I was having that, last video I was talking about how running White Plume Mountain actually took me 2 or 3 times as long as I was expecting. Again, remember that we play between 2 and 3 hours. It's usually 2.5 hours on any given night during the week. We meet on one night a week at a game store, and due to people work and this and that, and the game store closes at a certain time, we run 2.5 hours, sometimes upwards to 3. And so there was some discussion of like, how quickly could you get through it if you were doing your standard 4, 5, 6 hour gaming sessions or whatever. And Rob is convinced they can get to it. They can get through it pretty quick. So I hope you do, and I hope you have fun with it. Let's see. And then Rob Plummer also mentioned we've been using the reroll initiative every round, and myself and my players both really like it. Yeah, I like it. What I've run into, the two battles or the two sessions, maybe we had more than two battles that I've done that in, where you re-roll initiative at the beginning of every round. Towards the end of the battle or towards the end of the night, I've had to say, okay, we're going to keep the initiative from this point forward because we start running out of time. But I do like the random chaotic element that it throws into things, and kind of changes your strategies and tactics. I like that a lot. So that's actually it this week for viewer feedback. I know sometimes we go longer than that, but that is the viewer feedback for this week. So let me take off my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we will get into, recapping what happened last time and going over the notes and everything. So here we go. Okay, so first thing I did, once everything was said and done, I calculated XP. I've been tracking all of the monsters and this and that, various things that would have granted XP. In White Plume Mountain, basically you get XP from defeating monsters. I don't remember anything else that said if they do this, grant an XP award or anything like that. I mean, that's very old school. It's kill monsters. And of course, in old school D&D, you also got XP for 1 XP for every gold piece or equivalent, gold piece value of treasure. So you could level up really quick based on that, which, that's not the case anymore. But anyway, I've been tracking everything, and I decided, because, White Plume Mountain was very set, it's going to begin here and end here, and it was sort of an interim adventure between the two halves of Out of the Abyss. I would just, once everything was said and done, I would hand out experience. Now, there's one player who kind of joined and was only in the last 2 or 3 sessions, so they didn't get the same XP award. But they still got an XP award, and they're going to be, the same level as everybody else going back into Out of the Abyss. But they didn't get the exact same XP award as the people that have been there the whole time. I do think that there is, I don't see it, I don't necessarily want to punish people who haven't been there, but I do want to reward people that have. I think that that's okay to do that. If somebody's been there for the long haul, it's okay to, reward them in a little bit different way. So anyway, but the long and short of it is, when they go into Out of the Abyss Part 2, they're all going to be 7th level. Now, the book calls for 8th level. I'm not too concerned about that, because this party, due to the, they've played for a while together now, and they, due to the size of the group, it's, pretty much double a standard size, and other things. I mean, I think they'll be fine, because they did pretty well in out of the White Plume Mountain fights, even when I was ramping up the difficulty. And towards the end of Out of the Abyss, if you'll remember Part 1, I was like, man, they're really OPing through some stuff, so I think they'll be fine. Now, there is a character who developed Lycanthropy. I don't know if you'll remember that from a video or 2 back. And, they got bit by Snarla the werewolf. And I said, do you want to make your roll in public or, secretly? And they said, I'll just roll in public. And they failed their constitution save, and they contracted Lycanthropy. Hasn't been dealt with yet. So, I sent messages to the group and to the player, and I said, hey, this needs to be discussed, or some sort of decision made on what you're going to do about this Lycanthropy, before we go into Out of the Abyss. And if they want to just pay the cost of Remove Curse, whatever level of Remove Curse gets rid of it, from a cleric, I'll say there's been enough time since White Plume Mountain, you could, pay for a cleric to do that, if they want to go that route. Another thing I did was I made it so that 30% of their loot, whether it's straight gold pieces or whatever, or the gold piece equivalent, is going to be given back to the guild that they're part of. And there's a couple of reasons I did that. One, because the guild is a heavy role-playing part of this group, that they have this Vanguard of the Eye that they can depend on for different things, and they have this guild hall and all this stuff, and it's a narrative device for introducing new characters. And in fact, during White Plume Mountain, backup characters arrived right after a bad fight that had killed some characters and things like that. And I just felt that was appropriate to say if you're going to belong to this organization and you're adventuring under their banner and using their resources and stuff like that, then you've got to turn over some of your loot as dues or whatever, or they take a certain portion that goes to administrating the guild. But two, White Plume Mountain is also old school it just showers treasure on you, like lots of gold pieces worth of stuff. And really at their level, it's kind of silly to have that much money. So I wanted to let them get it. Oh, we got this loot out of the dungeon, and the sense of discovery and looting it, which is usually more exciting than actually spending it. You hit a point in D&D where usually you don't spend all the loot you're acquiring unless you start getting into building keeps and all that, and hiring followers and whatever. But for the most part, this is just a tremendous amount of gold for them to have at this point. They just turned 7th level, so I also wanted to kind of address that without saying, hey, you guys have too much money. I kind of came up with this. Well, the guild wants 30%, and I'm going to make that from this point forward that the guild takes a portion. They don't take, like, if you get a really cool magic item, they're not going to take that away from you, but they want 30% of the gold piece equivalent of it. So I did that. So there's the lycanthropy, that they need to deal with. And, I guess if the character's like, I just want to be a werewolf, I don't know. We'll have a discussion in the party, and I may say that the guild is like, no, you can't be a werewolf and in the guild. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm assuming that they'll want to be cured of lycanthropy. And here's another interesting thing about lycanthropy that came up in some viewer comments on a previous video recently. Lycanthropy is a curse, not a disease. So, there was some discussion from one of my viewers that was like, hey, if you're a paladin of a certain level, you can't contract lycanthropy because it's a disease and they're immune to diseases after a certain level. Well, actually, it's a curse. So any level paladin can still contract lycanthropy because it's a curse, not a disease. So just kind of an interesting clarification there. So now wave, if you'll remember, is all of these, Black Razor, Whelm, and Wave are all sentient weapons with their own, goals, agendas, thoughts. It used to be called ego in older versions of D&D, and it came into like they could try to dominate their wielder and all this. But anyway, one of Wave's things is Wave will not allow a character to wield it unless it converts. It will not attune with you as a character unless you convert to worshiping a sea deity. So the player, there's a warlock that for whatever reason ended up with Wave, and Wave kept basically trying to, wouldn't you like to convert, and just, just kept it up because that's what Wave does. Wave's always wanting to talk about this, especially if nobody's attuned to it. It's like, hey, there's some bennies, and these sea deities are great, and Wave doesn't even care which sea deity, as long as it's a deity related to the sea. Wave's cool. So at first it was like, no, we don't want to do that. And then the players whose character was carrying Wave started going, well, maybe I will, and then kind of Wave kind of won her over. So one thing that we got into that was interesting, and I only, like with the other weapons, I only unlocked so much of Wave. I unlocked, I think, the +3/+3, and then there's also an ability that Wave has that if it scores a critical hit, it does some necrotic damage in addition to like the critical hit, or a certain portion is necrotic or something like that. So that's, and we're still all three weapons. To kind of adjust with the power level of the characters, because in my opinion these weapons are all basically artifacts. They're going to slowly awaken and slowly, be able to utilize more and more of their powers. Like, I didn't want to give these 6th and 7th level players or whatever these full weapons. It's just overpowered, and they're already kicking a lot of butt. So, you want stuff to be a challenge. If nothing's ever a challenge, even though that's kind of fun to be super powerful, it can get boring too. So you want a certain challenge level. Um, but anyway, so this character, uh, she's like, okay, and so she was like, well, what sea deity do I want to follow? And we got to look into the Forgotten Realms. There's not a whole lot of choices. Keep in mind, this adventure was written basically for Greyhawk, which would have had a different pantheon of deities. And in this Forgotten Realms, a lot of the deities that are related to the sea are evil. There's not a whole lot of non-evil choices uh, for sea-related deities. So that kind of presented an interesting dynamic when we were talking this through. Originally, the player, who is a chaotic neutral warlock, chose Umberly, who is a chaotic evil deity in the Forgotten Realms, but they're sea-related. And I said, hey, you can do that. I said, but keep in mind that there may be ramifications down the road, both within the group and also campaign and story wise, for you following a chaotic evil deity. I'm not saying that you can't follow Umberly, but keep in mind that there's could be some role playing stuff that comes out of this, because the group basically skews good. Not everybody's good, but they skew good. There's no evil characters in the group. They're all either neutral or good. Um, I think the most common alignment is probably chaotic good. And to suddenly have somebody who's chaotic neutral is already kind of on the fringes, but then they're worshiping a chaotic evil deity. That's a dynamic that could have consequences. So and they were also concerned that because they're a warlock, that if they suddenly chose to follow a deity, that their patron could be offended. And for the most part, I mean, there may be some actual rules as written for the warlock I didn't go look at that could state that there's an issue with that. But this warlock, his patron is a great old one, basically like a Cthulhu type elder being, and it pretty much says that those kind of warlocks, they're drawing off these cosmic entities that aren't even aware that people are sponging power off of them. They're just operating on a hold. Some of them could be asleep, and they're just drawing power off of them. So I said it's not a problem. I don't see that being a problem. Now, for several, a couple of weeks, because there was a week where I didn't play, which is why this video is delayed. It took probably a couple of weeks to get this out instead of the usual weekly video. Originally they were like, well, I'm just going to go with Umberly, but I may change that. And just today I got a text that said they were going with Deep Sashilus or Shashilus, which is a chaotic good sea deity. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like again, I wasn't going to keep them from going with Umberly, but evidently there's another player or there's another character in the party that evidently already followed Deep Sashilus or decided to. I guess they had some discussion outside of the sessions, or we had an interim week where one of my players ran a game. I said, hey guys, I'm going to take a break in between finishing White Plume Mountain and going back out of the Abyss. And normally what happens is one of my players will step up and DM a one shot for that week, which I think is a good thing to encourage. Because one, it breaks things up a little bit, gives me a little bit of a break, but it also cultivates more dungeon masters. Because we could end up maybe with so many players, we have to split into two groups, or for whatever reason down the road, I'd be like, hey, I can't DM this group anymore, and then you have people there who are ready to DM. So I think that's a good thing to do, and we've done that several times. I'll say, hey, I'm going to take next week off, or if I need to go on vacation or whatever, and somebody almost always steps up and runs a one-shot, and they always seem to have fun with it. So, and I always say, hey, you can use the characters from this campaign, but it's out of canon, nothing applies. You know, if you get loot, treasure, if you die, something like it doesn't carry back over into the campaign. So either use totally different characters, or if you use the characters in this campaign, nothing remain. You know, as you played, and that's fine, but it's as if it never happened when they come back into the main campaign. So now, one thing that came up specifically related to the Umberly and the deity and all that, I reminded my group of my approach to alignment, and that is the fact that I see it alignment in D&D as a cosmic force. It's part of the forces of that plane of existence, that universe or whatever. It's not just a relative moral spectrum. There are actually real world uh, objective cosmic ramifications to being a certain alignment, and then not playing what alignment you declare you are, because it's a fantasy world. So you know, and one of the ways that we've come up with people of different alignments being in a party and yet it's still working is, again, coming back to the guild. The guild has special rules of conduct, and it helps them overcome alignment differences. So, you know, it's like, if you're going to be part of this guild, these are the rules of conduct when it comes to interacting with fellow guild members and when you're in a party. You know, it'll be enforced. You can get kicked out or worse. They have, you know, it's like the military has the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is like a legal system within the military. The guild has like it's almost its own legal system. So that's kind of how we can overcome that if it ever comes to that point. But you know, for me, alignment in D&D is not just an afterthought. I mean, it's part of the baked-in underlying laws that govern the D&D world. For example, I have no problem, because I like D&D as escapism. It's not the real world, right? I have no problem with every orc being evil, and not this relative. Well, maybe they were raised evil, or if you took an orc cub and or whatever and raised it. No, they're evil. They're chaotic evil. Orcs are evil. They were created creatures and they're evil, and I'm okay with that in the fantasy world, because every now and then it's nice to just go, that's the bad guy. Other DMs and other groups may want things different. Okay, but and there's some people that love the alignment system, and there's some people that don't like it. It's too restrictive or whatever. I like the alignment system, and so I just reminded. That was a good opportunity to remind the party that in the group that, you know, when you choose an alignment or you're talking about deities or this, that, and the other, it can have ramifications in the game and in the world. So that's kind of it for my general notes, and now we'll go into the blow by blow of what actually happened last session. Okay, so, and again, remember that the vast majority of this is kind of my home brewing, how everything wrapped up and the final encounter and that sort of thing. So now when we finished last session, they were literally had just defeated the Afridi Nox and were standing in the corridor immediately after the fight. I mean, we ended right there. They had just defeated the Afridi, and there was some discussion of, they're like, what does an Afridi leave behind? And they wanted some ash, because it kind of poofs into a fiery, ashy kind of, when you destroy it, this kind of, poof. And they wanted some ash for a trophy, but I was like, well, there's actually no ash. It just disappears in a puff. It did leave, I think it leaves behind whatever it was wearing or whatever. I don't know. I said that there was a scimitar, which they didn't take the scimitar. So they also started discussing, well, do we leave immediately, or do we take a short or long rest? And they assumed that they would have to fight the Sphinx and or the other adventuring party. So they were like, because there was that other adventuring party I'd kind of made up and inserted into things to kind of put a sense of urgency and just some extra fun role-playing several sessions back. And then there's that Sphinx that keeps asking them a riddle to let them in. So they're thinking, we're probably going to have to get into another fight before we get out of here. So what they ended up doing is they went back to Burkett's guard post, where they fought Burkett and Snarla, and you have to get through that spinning cylinder thing. And they just took a short rest there. Uh, I was actually like, wow, they really should have taken a long rest because I had a fairly decent final encounter set up for them. But as you'll hear, it worked itself out on its own. So as far as the resting and whatnot, so after the short rest, and they did whatever they could do with a short rest. Uh, to my surprise, they decided against going back to finish the globes room. If you'll remember the room that has the 9 hanging mirrored globes that you smash, and some of them have treasure and some of them have monsters, and there's a key that drops out and you get locked in the room and all that. They only did like the minimum of those globes to find the right key to get out, and they said we'll come back later. Well, they decided no, let's just get out of the dungeon because quote unquote Caraptus wants to turn us into guardians. And if you remember from last session, right before the Afridi Nox attacked, there was this big congratulations, but you don't actually think I'm going to let you leave, do you? And you know, now you get to be guardians of the weapons in this dungeon and all this stuff. So, and I like that they gave themselves a sense of urgency from that, which, I like that. That means that the adventurer, the DM or whatever has done their job in presenting the atmosphere and the events, and the players are keying off of that. Like I didn't have to, try to rush them out of there, come up with some way to try to get them out of there. Um, they just on their own like we better get out of here, which I was glad because I'm ready to get them out and to the final encounter, but I wasn't going to strong arm them into that. So I was glad it worked out that way. Uh, and so they decided to leave. Uh, I described as the water had because the water drained out basically of all of the corridors in the dungeon that were flooded up to a foot of water. About half the dungeon is flooded, and then you go up some stairs, and certain parts of the dungeon it's not flooded any longer. Now, so I said that's gone. A couple of sessions back, they had found that valve at the bottom of that pool of water and turned it, and it had slowly drained the water out. Now, the Kelpies area where the Kelpies were living before the party destroyed them still had water in it, but everything had drained down that foot of water, so the ledge that goes around the Kelpies room was now easily visible, so they were able to just kind of navigate out. The Sphinx, when they came to the Sphinx, remember they're thinking, oh, we're gonna have to fight the Sphinx. The Sphinx actually congratulated them. Oh, well, look at that. That's quite impressive. Congratulations. And allowed, so you may leave because her job that she is given is to put the wall of force up, and people coming into the dungeon, they have to answer a riddle, go by. That's her whole job. She's not there to prevent people from leaving or anything like that. Um, and she actually seemed surprised that I gave them the sense that she's a little surprised that they were just walking out. She's like, oh, she's like, congratulations, but she's kind of like, whoa. And this is kind of a clue that the magic of the dungeon is kind of starting to fail, um, which is something I introduced into this adventure after the golem room. After I had on the fly, I had to change how the golem room worked because one of my players spoiled it. Um, so I changed it, and that was the one room in the dungeon I didn't have reset whenever people left and came back in, because it's kind of the magic is failing. This dungeon is so old. Um, so it's kind of a thing that the Sphinx is like, whoa, that's surprising because there could have been up to 4 Afridis that attacked the party, and there's supposed to be at least 2, but only 1 came. And that was my decision because they had just fought the giant crab and done the bubble and barely escaped the boiling lake when the bubble was collapsing. And then they fought an Afridi, and I knew that I had a major encounter to wrap things up, so I didn't want to make the Afridis the major encounter. But lore-wise in my brain, the party doesn't know this, but the dungeon is finally starting to kind of run down. So what should have been up to 4 Afridis was only 1, and it should have been at least 2. It was Nox and Nyx, maybe? I'm not sure, but it was Nox that attacked them. So they kept leaving in that final little corridor before they get to the spiral staircase going up, and where, they had found that kind of kayak with mock-up mannequins and the dead body of one of the players knocking against the corridor. which, by the way, Nox had done that. Nox was kind of still keeping things going in the dungeon and watching what was happening. And so he sent that message to the players that, you really should take this more seriously because of, again, several videos back where they rode the kayak across the frictionless floor and all of that in like, in total disregard for any danger. So, so Nox had actually done that. And as they left that hallway, the booming voice that had boomed right before Nox the Afridi attacked after they got wave boomed again and repeated the exact same message. So yet another clue that a lot of this stuff is kind of automated, really, kind of preset with magic, and you can't, you great job, but I can't allow you to leave, and you're gonna be my prisoners basically, and all this stuff, and don't give my Afridis a hard time. I'd hate to have to kill you or whatever, but no Afridi showed up this time. So yet another clue that things aren't quite right in this dungeon, and the players by this point are going, something seems a little screwy in this dungeon. So I think they started getting the point. But so they left the dungeon and they went to the Dead Knoll's eye socket, which is that little cave that's a few miles from the village. It's kind of in between the village and White Plume Mountain, kind of off to the side, and you can camp there, you can store supplies there or whatever. It's just kind of part of the adventure. It's not really super fleshed out, at least not in the main White Plume Mountain original adventure. I think maybe other adventures have fleshed it out more, I think. But anyway, they went there and took a long rest, and I'm glad they did for a couple of reasons. One, they hadn't identified the Stone of Good Luck or the Goggles of Night that they'd gotten from the same chest that Wave was in the giant crab boiling bubble room area. They kind of completely forgot about that during the short rest, but they remembered it during the long rest. And so it's a Stone of Good Luck, which is a very cool magic item, and also Goggles of Night, which is a cool magic item. Now, we had a classic kind of thing happen among the group, and I tried to stay out of it, but also offer my perspective. But I was like, you guys solve it however you want. There was a little bit of arguing over the magic items because one player who plays a rogue player was like, mine both, because I'm a rogue. So I need the Stone of Good Luck and I need the Goggles of Night. And it was like somebody else, one of the other players who doesn't speak up a lot, was like, well, no, kind of wait a minute. I haven't gotten a magic item in a long time. And so there was some back and forth, and it didn't get ugly or anything like that. But I said, that I said, as DM, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do. I said, but I'll say two things. One, you did have one player just decided they wanted both. So, maybe y'all can discuss it further if that's the best idea. And that may have been the best idea, or it may have not. But when one player is just like, I'm going to grab both magic items, I think it's totally fine for the group to say, wait a minute, and up to this point, the group for a couple, since I've DM'd them for a couple of years now, over 2 years, there's not a lot of quibbling and stuff like that. You can take that and you can take that. But here we have somebody objecting. And I said, and they didn't resolve it this way, but I said, I don't think there's anything wrong if you can't reach a decision through talking it out with a good old-fashioned dice off. Just both of you roll dice, and whoever rolls the highest or whatever, whatever the predetermined rules are that you come up with gets the magic item. Now, they didn't go that way, but I did suggest it to them as a possible way to resolve it. And I said, I'm not telling you guys to do this, and they ended up working it out, and everything was fine. And the one player got the Stone of Good Luck, and then the other player got the Goggles of Night. And the Goggles of Night just give you basically dark vision, and if you already have dark vision, it doubles your range of dark vision. So I'd be curious to hear how your groups that you play in, or as a DM or whatever, how you handle loot and how that, when that kind of stuff comes up. So anyway, all right, so they left the Dead Knoll's eye socket and they went back to the village where the final encounter was awaiting them. So I basically like to think of this final encounter and resolution and wrap up to um, our experience with White Plume Mountain as high noon. It's kind of like the old western, and you got the dirt road, dirt street, and the buildings on either side, and the villagers kind of watching, and the two people or the two groups facing each other off, and that's kind of, I purposefully designed this encounter that way just for the melodramatic drama of it all. Melodramatic drama, is that um, redundant? I don't know. Anyway, okay. So they literally got back. I said it's about noon when you get back. And I said the villagers like normal kind of come out and look and show interest when you come back, but something seems a little bit off. And I allowed a perception check, and that revealed that the villagers seem very tense and nervous. Um, and pretty soon, as they keep going down the into the village, they see somebody up ahead, like a group waiting for them, that are not villagers. Now, I never even brought the other adventuring party back in to this situation. I could have, but with the amount of time that I had to resolve this, uh, I really didn't have time to resolve it in one session. So we can just assume that the adventuring party is off in White Plume Mountain somewhere right now, and hopefully they survived and made it out or whatever. But that other rival adventuring party I brought in uh, was never supposed to be super central to the story. Now, I had considered making them members of the Zentarum or something like that, that were not what they seemed to be, and that were actually agents of a larger group, who were going to reveal their true colors at the end of the adventure and try to take the weapons. But I ended up going a different way with it. So that rival adventuring party was never a major thing. It was a little bit of comic relief, a little bit of a plot or narrative device or whatever to kind of give the other party, the main players, a sense of urgency. But I did kind of say, I may do something with them, but I didn't go that direction with them. So what I did was I ended up going with the Red Wizards of Fae because one of the players has a character named Arizima, and they introduced several sessions back that they have a tattoo that's a slave brand because they're an escaped slave of the Red Wizards of Fae. And in fact, when they found what they thought was the ring that gives a wish, that doesn't, but it's in the globe room, but they thought it did. One of the players was like, "Here, you should take this so you can wish away that tattoo." And that player was only all too happy to take that ring over that. Turns out the ring was fake, couldn't really uh, have a wish. So it's kind of, the author of the adventure was kind of trolling the players 40 years in the future or 40 years from the past or whatever, which I still love. I don't know. I just think that's great. But I said, okay. And then people started asking questions about this tattoo because one of the players was, a wizard and said, well, can I dispel magic on it and this and that and the other? And the player's like, well, I'm not sure. And I'm like, huh. I'm like, you made this part of your backstory, right? And they're like, yep. And I said, so how does this thing work? And they go, well, and they started giving some ways that it worked. And so outside of that session, I went, okay, where is your reference? Where's your lore? Where are you getting this from? And they were like, well, it was like a novel from 15 or 20 years ago, and maybe the author took liberties and all that. So I'm like, okay, so I'm like, it's really kind of your responsibility if you introduce something as part of your backstory to know how it works. They're like, but it's just a temporary character. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. It's, you've brought the character into the game, and now this has come up. Naturally, people are curious about that tattoo. So I started researching more, and I remember I asked in this video series, and people answered and were helpful with lore on the Red Wizards. So I went and studied up a little bit more on the Red Wizards. And, so I went, okay, so I decided to have the final encounter be the Red Wizards. And what I did was, you've got this Red Wizard I just named him Maris, Merys, and I took, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's NPC archetype stat blocks, and there's an archmage. And the artwork for the archmage in the Dungeon Master's Guide even pretty much is a Red Wizard of Fae. So I said, that'll work. Instead of going through, because I was online researching what's the stats for a Red Wizard and this and that and the other, and how did it, and after going down several different ways with that, and prestige class this and that, but nobody just had a set of stats that I could find for a Red Wizard. Um, so, and I did, I looked not, I'm sure if I would have looked further, I would have found it. Red Wizard's been around long enough, but I wasn't having a lot of luck. So I just looked at the Dungeon Master's Guide, and boom, the Archmage fit perfectly. So I used that. And then in the Tales from the Yawning Portal, in the monster and NPC stat blocks in the appendix, there's Thayan warriors. I guess they're in there because of Dead and Thay, the adventure that actually follows White Plume Mountain in the book. So I said, well, that'll work. And so what they did is you got this Red Wizard with 3 Thayan warriors, one of whom has Black Razor, is wielding Black Razor, and they've also got Scorch. Scorch is the character who you'll remember, and I'm still mind-boggled that the party did this when the relief characters came. And they there were some characters that died and got replaced, and then one character said, one player is like, Scorch doesn't want to go back in. He's freaked out. It was like a tiefling sorcerer, I think. Said he doesn't want to go back into White Plume Mountain. So the party just kind of offhandedly said, we hand him Black Razor, wrap it in a bedsheet, and tell him to go back to the guild in Phandalin, which is leagues and leagues away. And I didn't really catch they had said that until the next session. It came back up, and I was like, you did what? And they're like, yup. And I was like, oh. And they're like, yeah, in retrospect, maybe not the best idea. I was like, all right. And I talked about it in the videos, and a lot of the responses were like, wow. So I wanted to tie that in. Here's basically the backstory. The players don't know this, but here's the backstory of what I did. And remember, here's the scene. It's high noon. They're in that one-horse town street, right, facing two groups facing each other down, several, 100 feet apart or whatever. And one of them has Black Razor. One of the Thayan warriors basically has Black Razor at the throat of Scorch. And Scorch is obviously beat up and not looking great and kind of like, ugh. And so that's the scene they come upon. And the thing is, what I did was I had Maris, basically, for whatever reason, Maris and Arizima's previous master in the Red Wizards of Fae, there was, because the Arizima, the character who was an escaped slave, kind of recognized this Red Wizard but wasn't intimately familiar. What had happened was Maris had, for whatever reason, I don't pretend to know all the lore and this and that in the Red Wizards, had killed or deposed or whatever Arizima's previous master and taken all their belongings and slaves and all that. So this was Arizima's new master. And through the tattoo had been scrying, it was like, hey, where's this slave? Let me find this slave. And was scrying on Arizima and discovered, was about to come get Arizima and say, you're my property, and realized what was going on, that they were recovering the weapons from White Plume Mountain and all that, and said, well, let me just see how this plays out, and sat back and watched. And, Red Wizards, these archmages can teleport. So, just was content to just watch and see what was going on. So saw, realized they got all the weapons, realized that Black Razor had been sent off with Scorch and all that, intercepted Scorch, got Black Razor, and then just waited to see what would happen. And the reason they wanted all of the weapons, because there's this power struggle structure thing in the Red Wizards. Ultimately, like, there's some lich, arch-lich or whatever, because, there's like this high reverence for undeath in Fae. At least at this point, there's different time periods of Fae. I said this while there was still a pretty strong structure of Fae. Again, I'm not super knowledgeable on Fae, but they've kind of had power struggles, and some of their power has receded, and there's been a diminishing of Fae at more modern Forgotten Realm time periods, or whatever, Forgotten Realms time periods. But anyway, there's this like Archlich, and then there's like this inner circle um, of Red Wizards that kind of report directly to this Lich, and he wanted to get the weapons on his own in secret and bring these three powerful, famous weapons to the Archlich leader of basically the Red Wizards to get prestige and to be considered for the council of it's like Zulkers. I think a Zulker is kind of a a high, very high level person, wizard in the Red Wizards of Fae. So he was kind of on. He wasn't doing this like officially as a representative of Fae. He was doing this on his own. So he brought these three warriors, and himself to come confront the party. And Arizima was like, "This is weird. Why is this? I don't see an apprentice here with this red wizard. This retinue, this group of warriors is rather small. This is strange." So Arizima realized, with the knowledge of Fae that Arizima has, having been a slave in Fae, that something wasn't quite right here. But the party doesn't know all this stuff, that this guy's basically acting on his own. He doesn't want anybody in Fae to know about it right now. He just wants the weapons so that he can make a present of them to the ultimate archwizard guy, Archlich, and get favor and get on the council of Zulkers. So that's kind of the setup. The players still don't know any of that, but that's what I reasoned through what was going on here. So, there's some back and forth, and in the high noon thing, one of my players did catch. He was like, "Ooh, high noon," and I was like, "Yeah, he caught what I was trying to go for." But anyway, Maris basically offered an ultimatum, and he's, it's kind of one of those typical threatening situations, but trying to kind of couch it in polite language or whatever. But he's like, "Come, let us be reasonable. Hand over the weapons, and your guild and the Red Wizards can do business in the future. We could use your services," and then there's some veiled threats, like, "I mean, why have us as an enemy?" Right? So it's kind of a carrot and the stick kind of thing. Do what I want you to do, and not only will we not fight, but maybe we'll even hire your guild to do stuff, and you can make money. Or you'll have us as an enemy. It's kind of that thing. And, oh, by the way, I will need her back. And Arizima is a female character. I will need her back. And at this point, Arizima's tattoo is really starting to glow. So there was some discussion, some back and forth, and basically the party finally decided, forget you. And at which point, Maris was like, "Oh, very well," and he kind of signaled, and they just killed Scorch with Black Razor, just grrr, and which did two things. One, kind of set a tone of, this is very serious. One of your people who has been part of your party has just been murdered in front of you. Now, I checked with the player who created Scorch. I'd been talking with them a little bit, and I asked them, I said, "How attached are you to Scorch?" And they said, "Not really." So I checked before I did something like this. If somebody was like way in love with this character, I wouldn't have done that. I would have found some other way to make it menacing and threaten, give them a chance to save Scorch, kind of thing. But yeah, they killed Scorch, which, one, narratively was a strong moment, but two, it powered up Black Razor with a soul. And when that happens, Black Razor gets it gets haste. Well, I think Black Razor can cast haste anyway, but they get some temporary hit points, and I think advantage on attacks and all that, while those temporary hit points last from eating a soul with Black Razor. So one of the Thean warriors not only has Black Razor, but is kind of powered up from eating a soul. So there's a game reason and then also a narrative reason to do that. And Scorch is dead. The fight is on. The battle was joined. One other thing I did was I had Arizima's tattoo. Again, I kept coming back to this tattoo. If you're going to put it in the game, I can use this, especially if you don't know how it works, and I get to come up with how it works. Uh, Arizima's tattoo was glowing and became painful to the point where she was at disadvantage during this combat. It's like basically on everything, anything that was physical or combat related or something like that, she was going to be at disadvantage. And there may have been some mental or wisdom stuff, but basically at disadvantage on everything. Now, dispel magic would have temporarily alleviated this pain, and I would have said, for the rest of the fight. But they didn't try that. Even though it had been discussed several sessions back that you can temporarily make one of these tattoos fade with dispel magic, but it will come back. I don't know if that's official lore, just what my players were telling me or whatever, but I kind of keyed off that to say, well, you can make the paint go away temporarily. But they didn't try that. And I even said out of character, I said, there is something you could do to make this pain go away. Just to let them know I wasn't trying to be a complete jerk, that there was something they could try. And there had been hints from previous sessions, something that may have worked. The battle was a good fight. Maris and his warriors were pretty effective. There were, a couple of players or player characters were dropped to 0 hit points. There could have been some death. That didn't happen. But there was a lot of interesting fights, and Maris is tough. 12. He's a 12th level spellcaster. He's basically a 12th level wizard. I mean, he's doing some pretty crazy stuff that the party's not used to. Like banishing people, because the beast druid or whatever, can be pretty powerful in the right circumstances, and he just banished the druid, and they were like, ooh. And now I think he lost his concentration a few rounds later, and the druid came back. But I was doing some different stuff they weren't used to. I had them cast magic missiles, a 9th level spell, and just they're like, whoa. So I really kind of had fun with Maris as an archmage. The guy with Black Razor was pretty dangerous. He took somebody to 0 hit points, but they killed him. They did end up defeating him, and they said, wouldn't that be cool if as he died, Black Razor kind of spun and then kunk right into him, on the ground. And I said, well, due to the rule of cool, that's what just happened. And they were like, yeah. So we had a fun fight. Now, what I was originally going to have happen was Maris was going to fight to a certain level to, if it got where it went really bad for him, then I was going to have him teleport out and maybe become a recurring nemesis down the road after Out of the Abyss was finished for the guild in general, because his pride is hurt and he wants those weapons and that sort of thing. And I hadn't decided what I would do if he won. I don't know. I probably would have just had him take the weapons and leave them, unconscious or dead or whatever, and not just coup de grace everybody and kill everybody, just so they would know that he defeated them or something. I don't know. I mean, probably true supervillain. He probably should have killed them to leave no witnesses, but it didn't get to that point. It was a really good fight. The players had to work at it, but again, they proved that this larger group, even though I adjusted things for a larger group, this larger group and the way they work together and the mix of the classes and everything, they're pretty good. So they handily survived the fight, even though they did have a couple of people go to 0 hit points. And I did stuff that they're not used to. Like they were like, I cast Cure Wounds, and I was like, no, you don't, because Maris is, as a reaction, is going to counterspell. They're like, oh, they're just not used to that kind of thing. So they're getting kind of like, whoa, this guy's really kind of, he's really good. So, it's kind of had fun with Maris. And there was, but they did eventually win. Like I said, the Warriors were defeated. I think there were 2 still standing after Maris was defeated. And I was like, you're just going to beat them. We're not going to go through the exercise, the rolls and everything. You just defeat them, because they were going to beat them at that point. All that's left is 2, wounded Thayan warriors. And basically the whole party was either up or about to be, have cure wounds so they'd be back up, that kind of thing. There was no way these 2 warriors were going to prevail. So, or even realistically be a challenge. But anyway, so Maris was going to teleport out if things really against him. But Arizima, his slave, his property, managed to get close and stab him with a magical dagger. Or it may have been just a regular dagger. I think it was a magical dagger. And remember, if you run an archmage, man, they start right off with mage armor and bark skin and all. Really, you can really have fun with these archmages. But I think at this point, because of concentration spells, the bark skin had gone away, and stabbed him with a dagger. And this infuriated, because the battle's already going against Maris, but his slave, his property, this is unheard of, stabbed him. And I just, I changed on the spur of the moment, reacting to what happened in the battle. And he enraged to the point where he lost his common sense. And he just lightning bolted Arizima, knocked him unconscious, and was about to lightning bolt him again and kill him. And the players just took Maris out, because he was so focused on Arizima. He just lost it. It's like, what? And he was focusing on purely on Arizima. And so instead of teleporting out, as I originally planned, they defeated him, because I was like, well, I'm going to have him react very, intensely to the fact that his property, his slave, this is so against Red Wizard society, and it's just such, like, what, just lost it. I was like, so anyway, that's basically what happened. They recovered all the weapons. They got Black Razor back. They're wielding Wave. They're wielding Whelm. I don't know what they're going to do with Black Razor. I've asked them. You need to let me know by next session what's going on. I think they're going to let Black Razor go back to the guild and let the guild control and protect and maybe use Black Razor. It kind of sounds like that none of the party members want to, but we'll see. But anyway, that's it. I mean, and Arizima, again, knows that something was odd about this, but the party doesn't know. Now that White Plume Mountain's over and that Maris is not going to be a recurring villain or anything like that, or nemesis, if they ask, I'll tell them what was going on. But, up to this point, they don't know. All they know is that was kind of weird. But I just wanted to have a fun final encounter. Because, I really wanted to get the point that this is a big deal that these weapons have been recovered. And the guild, could still in the future, this still could be the avenue for other things to happen. People wanting these weapons, because they're a pretty big deal. Anyway, that's it. That's White Plume Mountain. Thanks so much for watching all the videos if you did, or thanks for watching this one if this is your first time watching my videos. I really appreciate it. Make sure to leave a thumbs up and a comment on YouTube. That helps me out a lot. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And, I welcome your thoughts on how I kind of homebrewed the end of it and how you would have done it, and if you enjoyed this entire video series. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. And when we come back in a week or so, it will be Out of the Abyss Part 2. Thanks for watching.